we need to deconstruct. And yet every society did it wrong. We all did it wrong. Capitalism, it's wonderful that you can get a safety pin at 4 a.m. within a half mile of anywhere in the United States. And I'm sure the Russians wish they had it so good. But is that the be-all and the end-all of cultural values? That you can walk the fluorescent lit aisles of Kmart and congratulate yourself that whether it be gas can, sanitary napkin, or whatever, it's there waiting for you? I don't think so. I think that we have built in the termination of our world just as surely as the Marxist world built in a tripwire into its social mechanism. It's just that we're going to have to pay the piper more downstream in a while. What's happening globally is that the contradictions of all of these social systems are rising into evidence. I mean, we have lethal ideas. The world is haunted by a number of lethal ideas. The hot lethal idea at the moment is crack, and we're exhorted it's terrible. 11-year-old children are apparently the sole source of support for a $14 billion industry. Civilization is going over the edge. As a former member of the High Church of Rome, I feel it's incumbent upon me to point out to you that the policies of the papacy on population are shoving more people into early death, disease, and degradation than any drug scourge you could imagine. And I haven't heard any call for the extradition of the Pope. So, it's just a matter of cultural style and blindness, where you think the suffering is coming from and who you think is responsible for it. If we descend into the dominator metaphor and play its game, we're probably going to be snookered because they've had a long, long time to figure out all the angles. What I find myself more and more leaning to is sharing the meme of the irrelevance of conservative institutions. History is not a process for which you ask permission. History is just something you make, and then other people pick up the pieces. Henry David Thoreau understood this very well when he wrote his famous treatise on civil disobedience. The growth of culture is something that comes out of the animal body. Rousseau called it the general will. Man proposes and God disposes. But in the realm of civil polity, the people dispose, and government is allowed to propose. But that's all. And now what we are involved in, really, is a debate about human nature. Who are we? What are we? The French cartoonist Mobius put it very well in his book where he asked the question, is man good? This is what we're going to find out. And my feeling is that it isn't decided yet. That it is, H.G. Wells called history a race between education and disaster. Well, they're in the home stretch, neck and neck. It's clearly going to be a photo finish. But there is a responsibility on everyone who sees this to communicate it to other people and to act upon it. I think we forget, all of us, what a tiny percentage of the human race we represent, and how many people are just so lost in propaganda and unexamined cultural values. And, people are worrying about how to get the next $600 end table, or just trivia. And yet the world rolls inexorably toward a confrontation with transformation or ruin. How can the word be spread without just spreading panic? Well, I think it has to do with empowering this notion of a planetary process, a Gaian birth that we are midwife to, which is a functional role, but not a central role. The process is going to happen. Our job is to ease it, to reassure the mother, reassure the spectators, help the child, bring everything to a calm fruition. But we are ultimately witnesses to the process, not its cause. And in the ethics of the position of witness, we can find, I think, a place to stand that will allow us to feel responsible and exercise moral responsibility without feeling paralyzed by the magnitude of the task. Things are getting better and better in every way. I mean, it's a complex process because the world lives through death. I mean, you can see, if you're an embryologist, that when the little paddle of the fish human in the fetus begins to change into a hand, the way in which the fetus develops is through the sculpting hand of death. Death carves away tissue. Cells are shed into the amniotic fluid. They die. And out of this process of inward dying, the undifferentiated fish-like fetus turns into a miniature anticipation of a human being. There is something totally consuming about the way nature builds life out of death. The Amazon is a wonderful example of this, because the Amazon is the most living place you have ever seen. And at any given moment, all organic material is bound in living systems, 95% bound in living systems. You don't find forest floor detritus and rotting logs and stuff like that in the Amazon. If a leaf falls, within minutes or hours at most, it has been found by leafcutter ants or some other pathogen that begins to return it to the cycle of life. This kind of economy, this kind of stability through utilization of flow, is the design principle that we have ignored for several thousand years, and that offers a way out. Dynamic equilibrium, an abandonment of the possibility of closure. Closure is a neurotic and infantile demand to make upon reality, other people, language. You just have to live in this state of dynamic disequilibrium, which, if sustained long enough and in sufficient taste, becomes a life well lived. The shaman knows this because they plunge into this realm where everything is transient flow and interlocking field, where the materiality of the ordinary reality is overcome by the quantum mechanical, wave mechanical, maternal face behind appearances. And again, it must be Moby Dick morning. Ahab says, if you would strike through the mask. It is behind the mask. Reality is a mask, because reality enforces this idea of permanence, but not if carefully examined. Women know this, because women see birth, bury the dead, raise the children. They exist in this domain of flow. But the male dominant ego because it is transient and has great anxiety about that, refuses this primary intuition. And when I say that the original partnership society was stabilized through boundary dissolution, that's what I mean. The dissolution of the assumption of permanence. Me, my existence, my women, my food, my children, my weapons, my land, my this, my that, all of that is seen as a fiction. That's why primitive people are so amused by us and our concerns and our clutching, because they know easy come, easy go. And if we could learn this one thing, this is what the plants are trying to teach, I think, that the border between life and death, between being and not being, between me being me and me being you, is so trivial and so arbitrary that it can only be seen as the outer iridescence on the real reality within. This is the secret of a happy life, I think. I mean, I certainly don't claim to achieve it. I am fraught with the Agenbite of inwit and the torments of the 42-year-old Irish male, California, heavily mortgaged soul. But I saw it. I saw what it was. And what it is it's a coming to terms with impermanence. And that gives you authenticity that nothing can take away, and courage and presence in the moment and humor and survivability. And if you hold instead to the inviolate pearl of that which cannot be destroyed, everything becomes your enemy. Time becomes your enemy. Space becomes your enemy. And you are doomed to that Ahab fate because, hey, it's bigger than any of us. You can't push the river. Well, that's just by way of summation, trying to say, what is at the pith essence of shamanism, aside from the colorful cultural forms, the dances, the feats of curing and legerdemain. Essentially it all rides, I think, on this vision that all things are impermanent, nothing lasts, all the things are in the process of coming to be and passing away unto the last syllable of recorded time. Well, that was that.